Buying a house is strange. Before the actual buying even starts, people already carry opinions. This builder feels premium. That one feels safer. I've heard good things about this project. And honestly, people become emotionally attached surprisingly early. They imagine their future there, the morning light, the school nearby, the commute, the lifestyle. They're not just evaluating square footage, they are imagining stability. But then the actual buying begins. Suddenly the conversation changes. Budget enters, loan approvals enter, possession timelines enter, commute enters, school distance enters, availability enters, and slowly emotional preference starts collapsing into operational trade-offs. Not because the preference stopped mattering, but because the buying environment changed. And I think crowded B2B markets work similarly. Most founders think the buying moment is their opportunity. The moment buyers finally compare vendors, finally understand the market, finally appreciate how different the product really is. But crowded markets work differently. The moment buyers start evaluating vendors, differentiation starts collapsing. Because buying moments don't reward nuance, they reward simplification. And honestly, this is what makes B2B so frustrating for founders, especially technical founders. Because from inside the company, the differences feel massive. The architecture is different, the philosophy is different, the trade-offs are different. The product sees the problem differently. And this matters because most founders are not building random features. They're usually reacting to something they believe the market misunderstands. A trade-off everyone accepted, an assumption nobody questioned, a problem everybody framed too narrowly. I once worked with a deep tech video infrastructure company. On the surface, they operated in a brutally crowded category, video compression. And honestly, video compression is not exactly a sexy category. Most conversations in that world revolve around smaller file sizes, lower bandwidth, lower CDN costs, lower infrastructure spend. Compress more, spend less. That's the category. But this company disagreed with how the category framed the problem itself. Their philosophy was, you should compress video without destroying viewer experience. And that sounds simple, but inside streaming platforms, that changes how you think about the entire problem. Because poor viewing experience doesn't stay inside video quality. It leaks everywhere. Lower watch time, lower completion rates, lower repeat viewing, lower retention, higher churn, lower monetization, especially on unstable mobile networks. Meaning this company wasn't really thinking about compression as an infrastructure problem. It was thinking about compression as a viewer experience problem disguised as infrastructure. That's a very different philosophy. And internally, that difference felt huge. The engineering trade-offs were different, the optimization logic was different, the way they thought about quality itself was different. And honestly, this is where most founders live psychologically. They look at the product and think, if buyers really understand how differently we approach this problem, they'll see why this matters. And that belief makes complete sense until the buying process starts. Now imagine sitting inside one of those enterprise evaluation meetings. At first, the conversation is about viewer experience, retention, completion rates, streaming quality on unstable networks. But slowly the room starts changing. The infrastructure team asks about deployment complexity. Finance asks about infrastructure savings. Procurement asks, how does this compare to the vendor we already use? Someone asks, can we solve this by upgrading hardware instead? Another asks, what's the implementation risk? Another asks, how long will migration take? And suddenly, a philosophy that saw video compression differently starts collapsing into operational trade-offs. Not because the philosophy stopped mattering, but because the buying environment changed. That's the important part. And it got even harder because the company wasn't only competing against similar compression vendors. It was competing against completely different ways of solving the same outcome. Some companies said upgrade infrastructure. Others said improve hardware acceleration. Others said redesign delivery pipelines. Others said optimize CDN architecture. Different philosophies, different technologies, different intervention points, same business outcome. Reduce infrastructure cost, improve streaming performance. And this is where something subtle starts happening in crowded B2B markets. Buying moments flatten both vendors and philosophies into operational trade-offs. That's the part most founders don't see early enough. Because founders think buyers evaluate philosophy during evaluation. But evaluation environments are not designed to absorb nuance. They're designed to reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty reduction simplifies choices. This is why so many differentiated companies start feeling strangely interchangeable during enterprise sales cycles. Not because the product became worse, not because the differentiation disappeared, but because the buyer's psychology changed. Think about what actually enters the room during evaluation. Budgets, procurement, migration fear, timelines, internal approvals, engineering effort, career risk. The buyer is no longer asking who sees this problem differently. They start asking which decision feels safest to defend internally. That is a completely different psychological environment. Founders think buyers evaluate philosophy. Buyers under pressure evaluate risk. And risk changes how human beings process information. The moment pressure enters, people stop expanding mentally, they start compressing mentally. That's what evaluation actually is, compression. And maybe that's why buying a house feels strangely emotional at first and strangely practical at the end. Because the moment evaluation begins, human beings stop optimizing for possibility, they start optimizing for certainty. And maybe this is why so many founders feel invisible in crowded markets. Not because the products aren't different, but because the market only meets them inside environments designed to compress difference. And that's the real danger of the buying moment. By the time people start comparing options, they're often no longer searching for what feels most different. They're searching for what feels safest to live with later.